the friendship. Inviting the ruins under which the writers of the South have been reared. Though Windsor, near Port Gibson, Mississippi, like Faulkner's Sutpen's Hundred, was burned after the war. Virtue South smiles in this painting by Eastman Johnson of New England, as in the songs of Southern sentiment Stephen Foster wrote before he traveled there, though it took war and Reconstruction to draw the truth of Uncle Remus from Joel Chandler Harris's otherwise feeble reporting. "Howdy, Sis Cow," says Brer Rabbit, says he. "Why, howdy, Brer Rabbit," says Miss Cow, says she. "How you find yourself these days, Sis Cow," says Brer Rabbit, says he. "I'm sort of tolerable, Brer Rabbit. How you come on?" says Miss Cow, says she. "Oh, I'm just tolerable myself," says Cow, "sort of lingering twixt a balk and a breakdown," says Brer Rabbit, says he. "How your folks, Brer Rabbit," says she. "They are just middling," says Cow. "How Brer Bull getting on?" says Brer Rabbit, says he. "Sort of so-so," says Miss Cow, says she.
Talk about the ladies of your own. These bold weavers, they're gonna rob you of a home.
In the sketches from Winslow Homer's 1875 stay in Petersburg, Virginia, the old plantation sentiment has drained out and left the sharpness and color of black rags, an indomitable jazz and blues that would take the world by storm. The underlife Faulkner would grope to in Dilsey's church or Nancy's cabin by the ditch in that evening sun, though the outward poverty might almost vindicate Fitzhugh's scorn of emancipation.
He's looking for a home.
But the Civil War was over. In the expansion, which by 1900 would break in Charles Ives, Walt Whitman of American music, the booming nation left the broken South to nurse the first American experience of ruin. Carrier Ives titled the 1868 print which pursues the railroad from the east over plains to the Rockies, westward the course of empire takes its way. Would the Concord rallying be reenacted? Thoreau, old deeds for old people and new deeds for new. But forgetting Thoreau's, if a man should walk through this town and see only the reality, where, think you, would the mill dam go to? Emerson had sounded the call. Our log-rolling and politics, fisheries, Negroes and Indians are yet unsung. Yet America is a poem in our eyes, and it will not wait long for meters. No wonder he hailed Whitman's Leaves, the most extraordinary piece of wit and wisdom that America has yet contributed. I give you joy of your free and brave thought. Did not its ubiquitous self range the continent, prospecting, gold-digging, girdling the trees of a new purchase? Later chance lead westward. I see the Pacific Railroad surmounting every barrier. I hear the echoes reverberate through the grandest scenery in the world. In that homesteading rush, regional authors spring up everywhere, and their post-war life is humor. Mark Twain. Startling against Melville, to trace the evolution of a comic genius, to see an author who starts in the easy journalist vein of this reckless driving in frontier America with the celebrated jumping frog of Calaveras County. An author who absorbs, like Frank Mayer of Annapolis, in this 1858 portrait called Independence, the innate benign of Emerson. We interfere with the optimism of nature. Wordsworth's that we can feed this mind of ours in a wise passiveness. Descending through Thoreau's, I sat in my sunny doorway from sunrise till noon, wrapped in a reverie. I grew in those seasons like corn in the night. And Whitman's loaf with me on the grass, loose the stop from your throat, to Huck Finn's drifting down the big still river, laying on our backs, looking up at the stars. That an author who could bring the intimations of Wordsworthian childhood and Thoreau's I have always been regretting that I was not as wise as the day I was born, to bear on a boyhood fresh as in Winslow Homer's 1870 studies of country schools, turning Tom Paine's scorn of tradition governing beyond the grave, it is the living who are to be accommodated to Huck's defiant pragmatism. After supper, she got out her book and learned me about Moses and the bulrushes, and I was in a sweat to find out all about him. But by and by, she let it out that Moses had been dead a considerable long time. So then I didn't care no more about him, because I don't take no stock in dead people. That an author, apt to intuitive nature, Paine's government-like dress is the badge of lost innocence, and Thoreau's I did not want to live what was not life. Living is so dear, nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. To keep soul in this earth body, not shrink philosophy into a stoic vault or Christian tomb, rather as Huck, skeptical of prayer, sat down one time back in the woods and had a long think about it. To follow Thoreau at Walden Pond past an invisible boundary. To live with the license of a higher order of beings, abandoning the pretense of church, those Kentucky feuders at the sermon with their guns, taking to the storm river, the sky ever so deep when you lay down on your back in the moonshine, to float with the riffling water. You feel mighty free and easy and comfortable on a raft. How strange, in the mode of laughter, which well-being shares with scorn. That Mark Twain, heir to such Rousseauian goods, Emerson's pervasion of frontier and marketplace, would be seized, like Blake, with the spectre of the winged dragon, harrying the woman clothed with the sun. Melville's visible objects are but his pasteboard masks. Is it a comic revelation that the maker of the Jumping Frog and Tom Sawyer should have closed his life in the solipsistic tortures of the mysterious stranger? It is true, that which I have revealed to you. There is no God, no universe, no human race, no earthly life, no heaven, no hell. It is all a dream, a grotesque and foolish dream. Nothing exists but you, and you are but a thought, a vagrant thought, a useless thought, a homeless thought, wandering forlorn among the empty eternities. He vanished and left me appalled, for I knew and realized that all he had said was true. Goya had run such a comic course almost 100 years before, his opening jollity the court play of the Ancien Régime, though among his tapestry designs those of children remind us how far the loves of Tom and Becky in the Missouri school rested on enlightenment, a meal, Goldsmith's Village Green, before the ideal village was deserted. From that delight Goya weathered also through war, to the 1820 gall and heartburn of the black paintings on the walls of his own Quinta del Sordo near Madrid. If all comedy blends the bacchanal of good and the barbed castigation of wrong, no wonder if its masters slip to the lacerative side, swift before Chaplin in our time. Twain's comic peak in Huck Finn is inseparable from the tarred Duke and King, Buck shot down in the feud, Colonel Sherburne's diatribe on man. I was born and raised in the South, and I've lived in the North, so I know the average all around. The average man's a coward. Now the thing for you to do is to droop your tails and go home and crawl in a hole. though Huck can still go to the circus, steal under the tent, and revel in those sure-enough queens, a real bully circus. Was it the Baroque heritage or his own resilience that brought Goya in his last years through the black pit to the laughing myth of aun aprendo, I'm still learning? And was it the vulnerability of Mark Twain himself or of romantic optimism that let him sink always deeper into the cruelty of God and man, whether in exploited Congo or in microscopic nightmare? Though his wit flashed to the end, I came in with Halley's Comet. It will be the greatest disappointment of my life if I don't go out with Halley's Comet. And he did, 1835 to 1910. Whereas Melville, on tragic course, had already battled the worst, and in Billy Budd come through to a sacramental calm. As Auden wrote, toward the end he sailed into an extraordinary mildness. Thus the hero is executed under the Blakean fatherhood of starry Vere. The vapory fleece, hanging low in the east, was shot through with a soft glory as of the fleece of the Lamb of God, seen in mystical vision, and simultaneously therewith, watched by the wedged mass of upturned faces, Billy ascended, and ascending took the full rose of the dawn. But if we are contrasting comic and tragic trajectories, what of Goya's aun aprendo? In America, it is as if the spectre of death under spangled robes had to be encountered again and again, each time with a new world surge of delight and shock of confrontation. How luminously Winslow Homer's red, white, and blue croquet game of 1864 affirms. Against Emerson's soul, Whitman claimed to celebrate the common and tangible. And early James, turning from those Hawthorne visions he loved, would try to refine as observational a fiction as Howells could. No doubt symbols lurk at the core. It is the corrupt misreading of Daisy Miller's Fresh Light which makes Europeanized Winterbourne say after her death, I was booked to make a mistake. I've lived too long in foreign parts. But the sunlit scene is actual. In the portrait of a lady, the ravishing Miss Archer's arrival on the Touchett's Tudor lawn. By 1899, Homer's realist surface buckles, as in Verdi's Otello, with the symbolic crisis Melville had faced 50 years before, that demonic ubiquity which brought Henry James to the close of The Beast in the Jungle. He saw it rise, huge and hideous, for the leap that was to settle him. His eyes darkened. It was close, and instinctively turning in his hallucination to avoid it, he flung himself face down on the tomb. So too the huge and monstrous alter ego of the Jolly Corner. It was for such seizure of villain touch, windpipe squeezed in the fakes of death, that Whitman haunted the opera. That 1863 letter from New York of Medori pouring out song like a raging river in a scene of love and poison. Comrades, this is in singing and music on a big scale, sometimes the whole band and chorus all putting on the steam together. Such singing and strong, rich music always gives me the greatest pleasure, and so the opera is the only amusement I have gone to for my own satisfaction for the last 10 years. And Turner, who had begun before 1800 with the Thames or Cromac water, a gleam night or day, sun or shower, with transcended Claude, by 1840 Melville returning from the South Seas, about to sail at once, like Bulkington, on the whaler Acushnet. Turner's slave ship loads the carnivorous sea with such a charnel house as would ravage again the wits of Black Pip gone overboard. Pip saw the multitudinous God omnipresent coral insects that out of the firmament of waters heaved the colossal orbs. If Shakespearean tragedy arose on the climb from medieval contempt of the world to the formulated command called Leibnizian reason, there is an inverse tragic motion down, as optimism transferred to romantic heart swirls once more in cosmic value drowning. Russell, that man is the product of forces which had no prevision of the end they were achieving, that all are destined to extinction in the vast death of the solar system. Iago's nihilist creed, I believe in a cruel God. The destructive immersion had begun with the romantic itself. Turner's 1836 avalanche in the Vale of Aosta, to peak by mid-century in Melville. I feel now like a billow that's all one crested cone. And in American art, about 1890, in the sea allegories of Ryder, where habitable space reverts to devouring worlds. Now small fowls flew screaming over the yet yawning gulf. A sullen white surf beat against its steep sides, then all collapsed, and the great shroud of the sea rolled on, as it rolled 5,000 years ago. But Whitman also, by 1871, had to rest the soul's habitation almost on Russell's unyielding despair. Democracy grows rankly up, the thickest, noxious, deadliest plants and fruits of all. We sail a dangerous sea of seething currents, cross and undercurrents, vortices, all so dark, untried, and whither shall we turn? But as Homer's late works grip night and treacherous ocean in the near abstract endurance of a lookout's all's well, Melville framed Billy Budd's sacrifice in Hegelian history. The opening proposition, rectification of the old world's hereditary wrongs. Straightway the revolution itself became a wrongdoer, the outcome of all, a political advance for Europeans. While Whitman bridled the leviathan of his democratic vistas, thought you greatness was to ripen for you like a pear? You must pay with a proportionate price. In an Othello, stripped of Shakespeare's vindicating universals, the murdering suicide's last gasp is harmony. Under the behemoth current west, it is curious to trace the eddies of eastward refinement during the Civil War, but in Paris and England. Whistler's pre-Jamesian Portrait of a Lady, with its Hawthorne sad reflection, while in transcendental America, behind the hedge and brick of an Amherst house, such a mirrored brooder spoke in Emily Dickinson. There's a certain slant of light winter afternoons that oppresses like the heft of cathedral tunes. Heavenly hurt it gives us, we can find no scar, but internal difference where the meanings are. None may teach it any, 'tis the seal, despair, an imperial affliction sent us of the air. When it comes, the landscape listens, shadows hold their breath. When it goes, 'tis like the distance on the look of death. Emily offended against verse form, Walt also against the content of Peele's 1823 Girl Drying Her Hair. Unscrew the locks from the doors, unscrew the doors themselves from their jambs. There had been Wertmüller's Coital Deny, modelled in Paris by court ladies and exhibited after 1806 in Philadelphia at 25 cents a head. There would be Sargent's Madame X with as much to cover as Chad's Wonderful Comtesse in The Ambassadors, but these are Dwight's Foul Harlot Europe against Fair Columbia. If Bradford had confessed of Plymouth Colony, not only incontinency between persons unmarried, but some married persons also, but that which is worse, even sodomy and boogery, things fearful to name, have break forth in this land oftener than once. Whitman was the first to celebrate breast that presses against other breasts, winds whose soft, tickling genitals rub against me. How Emerson overlooked that in The Leaves is not clear, but the children of Adam brought it home. Limitless, limpid jets of love, hot and enormous, quivering jelly of love, white blow and delirious juice. So the man who had written, I greet you at the beginning of a great career, backed off, until in 1865 he was quoted, there is also Walt Whitman, but he belongs yet to the fire clubs, and has not got into the parlors. As if the cry, undrape, you are not guilty to me, had torn the sheet off Peele's Still Life nude, exposing the lusts of France, Courbet's lesbians. Was the Whitman shock in part of things fearful to name? His union of body and soul, a mystical oral tree. I mind how once we lay such a transparent summer morning, how you settled your head athwart my hips and gently turned over upon me, and parted the shirt from my bosom bone, and plunged your tongue to my bare-stripped heart, and reached till you felt my beard, and reached till you held my feet. Though it was the dear love of comrades in Calamus that stirred British Simons to the question, from which Whitman reeled, claiming mistresses and bastards. Whitman's loading of self, earth, and all with the lushness of either sex may remain mysterious, but whatever he worshipped, firm masculine colter or brown melons of breasts, it was not prurience. Everywhere an abnormal libidinousness, bad blood, the capacity for good motherhood, deceasing or deceased, shallow notions of beauty with a range of manners, or rather lack of manners, considering the advantages enjoyed, probably the meanest to be seen in the world. Aikins held with Whitman to the sanity of birth, nature, and humanity. 28 young men bathed by the shore, 28 young men, and all so friendly, 28 years of womanly life, and all so lonesome. She owns the fine house by the rise of the bank. She hides handsome and richly dressed aft the blinds of the window. Which of the young men does she like the best? Ah, the homeliest of them is beautiful to her. Where are you off to, lady? For I see you. You splash in the water there, yet stay stock still in your room. Dancing and laughing along the beach came the 29th bather. The rest did not see her, but she saw them and loved them. The young men float on their backs, their white bellies swell to the sun. They do not ask who seizes fast to them. They do not know who puffs and declines with pendant and bending arch. They do not think whom they souse with spray. When Aikins, at 66, took up the celebration which had cost him an Academy post 30 years before, he resumed the subject of John Rush, Philadelphia sculptor of about 1800, who had carved a statue of the Schuylkill. But Rush here becomes the old Aikins, and the model whom his touching chivalry aids from the pedestal, wonderfully plain and sexual, as far from classic marble as Whitman's prostitutes, not till the sun excludes you do I exclude you, is the nude Pygmalion carved, and Aphrodite turned to flesh. Whitman, too, had sacrificed to that flesh, as he wrote in 1872, In the United States, neither the chief literary persons or organs admit Leaves of Grass as having any value or recognize the author as a poet at all. He has indeed been ignominiously dismissed from a moderate government employment for the sole and avowed reason that he was the writer of the book. No American publisher will publish it, many of the bookstores refuse to keep it for sale, and the position of the author, both as to literary rank and worldly prosperity in his own country, has been and remains today under a heavy and depressing cloud. Is America behind Europe, strangely neck and neck, or, as Whitman dreamed, searching somewhere in the van? Melville, Whitman, Homer, Aiken's Rider span the French modern, from Monet through Cézanne. But their style affinities are back, as to the revolutionary commitment of mid-century, this Millet sower, which Whitman would admire in Boston 30 years after. A sublime murkiness and original pent fury. Will America ever have such an artist out of her own gestation, body, soul? Whitman's Years of the Modern is as far from Impressionism as the Communist Manifesto. I see men marching and countermarching by swift millions. Are all nations communing? Is there going to be but one heart to the globe? The performed America and Europe grow dim, retiring in shadow behind me. The unperformed, more gigantic than ever, advance, advance upon me. There are at present, wrote de Tocqueville, two great nations in the world, which seem to tend toward the same end, although they started from different points. I allude to the Russians and the Americans. The principal instrument of the Anglo-Americans is freedom, of the Russians servitude. Yet each of them seems to be marked out by the will of heaven to sway the destinies of half the globe. And Whitman, you Russians and we Americans, so unlike at first glance, yet so resembling each other, the idea perennial through the ages that they both have their historic and divine mission. Like the Americans, Rapine in his 1885 Ivan the Terrible clings to realism, though with a violence which in Mussorgsky's Boris begins to disrupt the canons of the past, stripping, as no doubt Whitman's barbaric yawp over the rooftops of the world did, toward something elemental. But Whitman, against Boris, seems like